All right, joined by Frankie Corrado and Ryan Rishaug. Frankie McDavid's behind-the-scenes tirade during the Cup Finals gone viral. It was awesome to watch. What's your takeaway from the way he challenged his teammates and himself, and what's that say about his leadership, Frankie?
He cares, Gino. This is a guy who cares about winning. I don't necessarily think it's about what Connor McDavid's legacy is, although at some point I'm sure he wants to add a Stanley Cup to his resume. But it just looks to me like this is a guy who wants his team to succeed and has been down that path and really cares. He wanted to draw his team right into that battle. They did such a great job of coming back and making it a series, ultimately falling one game short. But that's Connor McDavid really caring and being very passionate about his team trying to win a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, it was interesting, Frankie. I don't think that's in Connor McDavid's nature, what we saw there. I think that's an extreme circumstance, a Stanley Cup Final, an extreme situation, being down 2-0. That was after Game 2. And that's what came out of Connor McDavid, right? I don't think that's something that regularly happens during a regular season. I think it was situational. But I agree with you. It shows how much he cares. And he said, in that program that nobody wants to win a Stanley Cup more than I do. Leon Draisaitl said nobody wants to win more than Connor McDavid. And I think in that moment, that's just what came out of him, And so as a reporter that's covered this player since the day he entered the league and even before, I've been curious as to know what it's really like behind the scenes. What's his presence in the room? What is he willing to say? What is he not willing to say? How much does he talk? And outside of that, we also saw him a couple of times, digging in, encouraging the group, trying to be better defensively, right? If the puck doesn't get out, everybody stop and get back. They scored 4 goals against us last game because of that. Really pushing the group from a defensive standpoint. So pretty fascinating to see the curtain pulled back in a number of different situations because we don't know a lot about Connor McDavid behind the scenes.
I want to follow up on that. McDavid's reaction after losing Game 7 has also gone viral for obvious reason. The tears were heartbreaking to watch. Shogger, you were just outside the room when it all happened. You were with the team, as you mentioned, every step of the way through these playoffs. What about this moment and some of the other behind-the-scenes moments has stuck out the most to you?
Yeah, so, that was a release, right? It finally hit him in the locker room. If you watch what you see when the buzzer rings, he's exhausted. He skates to the bench because he's exhausted. He puts his head down. I think he's a bit emotional there. But then he clicks into captain mode. He clicks into just lost and need to do the right things. And so you see him get up, console teammates, you see him shake hands, you see him say to Matthew Tkachuk, well-deserved, well-earned. You see him make sure he shakes everybody's hands. You see him give Stu Skinner a hug. He does all the things in that moment that as a captain you do. He comes off the ice and given the option to go accept the Conn Smythe in person or be with his teammates in that moment, it wasn't even a question for him. And he even said, I wouldn't have gone back out there for $1 million. McDavid goes back into the locker room. He sits down. You can tell he's processing it. And then once he sits down and it's time to take his gear off after all his captain duties are done, after consoling his teammates is done, we see him break down. And that's where you see what it means to this player. And the one thing I'll say, you guys, that stood out to me, if you think back to that losing streak when it was at its absolute worst, there was a shot of Draisaitl and McDavid together on the bench. And Leon Draisaitl reached over and patted McDavid's leg, and McDavid reached over and patted his leg back. Like the worst of it was an indication that they were still together. And that same thing happened in the locker room. McDavid, at his most emotional, Leon Draisaitl reached over, gave him a couple of pats on the leg. To me, the illustration of being in that together and that relationship, it was really, really powerful.
It's a good point by you, Ryan, because the guys, that maybe I've played with or I've seen along the way that are the best leaders, it's about everyone else first, and then they can kind of tend to themselves. And I think that's what we saw from Connor McDavid in that moment. And it's raw imagery. It's, we don't always get to see Connor McDavid like that. And even if you just saw him on the ice and you didn't have a chance to see everything behind the scenes, and you've watched his game evolve over the years, especially last year when things weren't going well, you saw a player that was committed to doing something different that maybe he hadn't done before. Like, he really improved his play away from the puck. There was more priority to that. And now you get to see, how he interacts with his team. It really is about the team first and Connor McDavid second. And that's what probably makes it even more impressive what he's able to do as far as the production that he puts up, because he's thinking about everyone else first. And he's still putting up these massive numbers. Connor McDavid should be looked at as the best, if not one of the best leaders in the NHL, and very, very close to winning a Stanley Cup, and it's going to happen for him.
And Frankie, I think there's a bigger picture thought here as well. So these cameras were allowed in all of these situations, but I can tell you that there would have been an opportunity where McDavid and his camp and the Oilers would have reviewed all of this footage, and opportunity probably would have been there to have cut back on some of what we saw. My understanding is that Connor McDavid took the position that it happened, we let the cameras in, we might as well just show it all. So given the opportunity to potentially veto certain portions of that, McDavid made the decision not to, and he did it for the good of the game. I'm not sure he'll do this too many more times, but I believe his attitude was, they were there, we let them in, this happened, it's real, it's raw, it sucks, but let's put it out there. McDavid loves these documentaries. He's watched the other behind-the-scenes ones. He's fascinated by it. And while he didn't want to be center stage, he said they were there, we might as well roll it out there. And that was a mature decision with the good of the game, big picture in mind.
Yeah, the behind-the-scenes access in these hockey series is amazing. The Oilers, Leafs, and Abs all took part. You can watch the rebuild inside the Montreal Canadiens on Crave.